Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us with Live Oak Online. I'm super excited about this Sunday because it's something we do every year. Once a year, we devote a Sunday a year to talk about what we call Next Gen Sunday. We talk about the next generation. We talk about what it looks like to invest in them. And this week, we're going to talk about what it looks like to love the next generation. We love the next generation. And I want to be right up front with my goal for you this morning. I want to move you to get in the game. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Here's the way I've talked about it before. I've got two chairs sitting here. This one right here, this is my chair. I got this when I went to the Masters. I had a chance to go to the Masters golf tournament one year in Augusta, Georgia. It was a fantastic sporting experience. I'm a hockey fan first. I love Tech basketball. I love Tech football. I try to love the Dallas Cowboys. I love sports. But golf isn't one of my highest love sports, but I had a chance to go to the Masters. This was the best sporting event I've ever been to. And this is the chair. I sat in this chair when I was there, and I had it parked off a fairway near Amen Corner. And I sat in this chair, and I watched some of the greatest golfers in the world come past. I saw some of the greatest golf being played. It was so awesome to watch this amazing sporting experience. I got to see the Masters in person, but I didn't play in it. I just watched. It was awesome. But I imagine it's a little bit different for someone who was in the game versus a participant, a spectator. Now, this chair right here belongs to my friend Mark Adams. Mark Adams is an assistant coach with Texas Tech basketball. And in 2019, Texas Tech basketball went to the Final Four in the national championship game, and this is a chair from the floor. This was a players' and coaches' chair that was on the floor at the Final Four, and my friend Mark Adams sat in this chair, and he didn't just watch the game. He was involved in the game. He was coaching. And there were players who sat in a chair just like this, that they weren't just watching a great sporting event. They were engaged, involved, and impacting a great sporting event. There is a big difference from being a spectator to a participant. And at Live Oak, I wish all our chairs were chairs like this. Not Final Four seats or Texas Tech seats, although that'd be awesome. But chairs that look, I almost wish they were all players' benches where people saw themselves as people who are ready to be coached and tapped on the shoulder and put in the game to make a difference, to make an impact. Today, I want to move some of you from being a spectator to a participant, to get in the game of loving the next generation. And let me explain why. Here's why I want to move that for you. That's why we want to move everyone from that in our church to being a spectator to a participant, especially in knowing, loving, and investing in the next generation. Our mission is to make more and stronger followers of Jesus Christ. That's why we exist as a church. We want more and stronger followers of Jesus Christ. And one of the groups we want to do that with is the next generation. And when I use that term, just for the rest of the way so you know what I mean by that, I mean at Live Oak we have our kids ministry, birth through 5th grade. Then we have Lawsome, Live Oak student ministry. That's middle school and high school. Then we have our college ministry, college students and college age students. And when I talk about the next generation, it's that age from 0 to 22. That's one of the groups we want to make more and stronger followers of Jesus Christ. That's one of our targets. And when we've talked about our mission field before as a church, we usually used two phrases: across the street and across the globe. We want to help people find and follow Jesus. We want to make more and stronger followers of Jesus Christ right here in our city. Serve those in need, point them to Jesus, love them like Jesus would, and make disciples. But we also want to do that globally, as far away as we can and anywhere we can. And we always talked about those two mission fields: across the street, across the globe, across the street, across the globe. And then it hit us. There's a third mission field we need to be aware of and really invest in significantly. Across the street, across the globe, and to the next generation. This is an unreached people group because every group that grows up needs to be introduced to Jesus, to be made aware of what it means to follow Jesus, to be challenged, to grow, to be more like Jesus, to become disciples of Jesus. Every time there's a new generation, it's an unreached people group. That's part of our mission fields, which means parents, you might be some of the most important missionaries we support. People, our teachers, if you're teaching out in a school somewhere in our city, you might be some of the most important missionaries we support. Coaches, counselors, administrators. If you're around the next generation, 0 to 22, we believe you're in the mission field, the heart of a very important mission field, the next generation. And the Bible tells us that we have this mandate to tell the next generation. It's in the book of Psalms. Psalm 78 says this: we will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he's done. What we've experienced about Jesus, we're supposed to tell the next generation. We're instructed to do that. As a matter of fact, the way we translate it here at Live Oak is we say this: everyone should do something to know and invest in the lives of the next generation. Now, it looks different from person to person, but I truly believe it's a core value for us that everyone should do something to know and invest in the next generation, because we're told that's God's plan. As a matter of fact, he tells us a little bit of the why, the impact it makes when we do that. Verse 5 of chapter 78, it says this: he decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children. He says, look, I've given you the truth that this is the way we should live. Then he says, follow it and teach your children. And when you do that, here's the so what. So the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born. And they in turn would tell their children. There's this rippling effect, this impact that goes on generation to generation when we commit to telling the next generation, loving the next generation. And then he says this: then, when that happens, then they would put their trust in God. They wouldn't put their trust in his commands only. They would put their trust in him and trust that those are from him. But they wouldn't just know about him, they would know him personally. They would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, what he's done, but would keep his commands. We were told to tell the next generation, and we're told when we do, it has a rippling effect that goes beyond ourselves. When you invest in the next generation, it has a rippling effect. Your life today, one way or the other, is going to create ripples that touch other lives. And I want you to know you can make a significant impact on the next generation if you would intentionally engage them. And parents, it's a tough job to be a parent. That's a tough mission field. We want to support you in that. We want to partner you with that. Grandparents, never underestimate your role. There have been so many funerals that I've been a part of where grandkids talk about the spiritual impact of their grandparents. But I have the feeling that some of the grandparents thought they were just spoiling or just kind of loving on them. They didn't know what impact they were having. Coaches, administrators, counselors, helpers in schools, like if you're involved in the next generation in any way, be intentional. You are right in the heart of the mission field, and it makes a difference. What I love is we have so many people at Live Oak that are serving and investing in the next generation. Adults who are setting aside time, carving out time to be small group leaders and coordinators and greeters and doing things behind the scenes, doing things on a stage, doing things life on life with students and kids. And it makes a difference. And I also love that many of our students, college students, high school students, middle school students, are serving and investing in our kids' ministry. When you do that in any way, I believe it has a ripple that has eternal consequences. It makes a difference. And I truly believe, and this is the challenge, that if you call Live Oak your church home, anybody and everybody should do something to know and invest in the next generation. If Live Oak is not your church home, this still matters. God told us that when you will tell the next generation, it has a rippling effect and an impact. And the next generation always matters. As a matter of fact, what we think should be prioritized as a mission field. Here's why. When we were given the Great Commission in Matthew 28 from Jesus, he told us to go and make disciples of all nations. And he gave us a clue of what that looked like. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach them to obey everything he's commanded. And he promised he's with you as you're doing that. So, man, if you're investing in making disciples, Jesus says, I'm right there with you. And he's prayed that promise to you at all times anyway, but there's something about his mission that I think you experience in a unique way. But the bottom line, he says, go and make disciples of all nations. And oftentimes when we think nations, we picture the Olympics of these different countries walking in with their flag. And every now and then I'll go, I didn't even know that was a country. Oh, wow, look at that. I forgot they existed. Oh, wow, look at them. They have a lot of athletes. Or what's that country with only one athlete? And we think of people groups as Olympic countries that are walking in. But I want to challenge you to think beyond nations and think, instead of nations, call them people groups. Because even within a country, you have various people groups that exist. And a lot of times when we think go and make disciples of all nations or of all the world, we think geography. Go here, geography. But I want you to think about the Great Commission to go and make disciples of all nations as not just geography, but also of time, of people groups. There are people groups that will exist in our world that aren't even born yet, that don't even exist yet. But there'll be something that they have in common where they are a people group that we're called to reach. That word literally means just a grouping of people. The next generation is a people group. They existed in time, and there's something about that generation that came up. And every generation is unique and has differences. When you think about going into all the world and making disciples, think about going into all people groups, all generations to make disciples. Because every generation is an unreached people group until they're a reached people group, right? Okay, move beyond the Great Commission to the Great Commandment. Jesus said this in Matthew 22. They said, what's the greatest commandment? They were trying to trick him. He said, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. It's the first and greatest commandment. And one of the things you need to know that if you want to make an impact on the next generation, start here. Start by loving God with all you have. Build a vibrant, thriving faith. Love God with everything and be an example of what faith looks like. Start there. But then he says, no, there's not just one. There's two commandments. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Again, when we think neighbor, we think geography. We think who lives next door, who sits next door to me in class, who works at the next cubicle from mine, or who works in the next office from mine, or who are my friends that I'm around with at sporting events. We think geography when we think neighbor. I want to challenge you to love your neighbor, but don't think geography, think time and think generations again. Love your neighboring generations as yourself. Love your neighboring generations. You're living out the greatest commandment when you love God with all you have and you love your neighbor next door, your neighbor around the corner, your neighbor who doesn't look like you somewhere else in the world or even in your town. And it also matters when you love your neighbor that's a generation or two down the block, down the timeline. Again, don't just think geography, think neighboring generations. How do we do that? Here's why it's so important we figure this out, because I think all of these keep telling us, love the next generation, invest in the next generation. Here's why I think it's so important. In the book of Matthew and in the book of Mark, we see two encounters back to back that Jesus has. And in Matthew 19, here's the first one. Jesus says, let the little children come to me. And they come running. So much so that the disciples start playing bouncer and putting up the velvet rope saying, hey, not just anyone can get in to see Jesus. And Jesus says, yeah, they can. As a matter of fact, they should be prioritized. Let them come unto me. And they do, and they come running. Then there's a story that happens next, both in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark. And it may not be on accident that in both Gospels, these are told back to back. Maybe they happened right together, but I think it has a very insightful look into what happens in our life development when we go from a kid to a teenager to a young adult. In Matthew 19, Right after the little children coming to me and they come running, we see this. The rich young ruler comes to Jesus and then he walks away when Jesus challenges him to love him with all he has, to lay down his possessions and follow him. He says, nope, and walks away. There could be, the challenge was too big for him, that he loved money or he loved himself more than he loved Jesus. But I think there's something else going on here. There's something that happens between being a child and being a teenager or a young adult where our independence kicks in. We start thinking from concrete to abstract. We get different challenges and influences in our life. Our independence comes in. Something happens where when you go from being a kid to being a young adult, a lot of them walk away. The stat that bothers us and has bothered us for years that we're committed to investing in and trying to change is the amount of teenagers that walk away from their faith when they hit college that were involved in either kids ministry or student ministry. They're part of a faith community, then they walk away from it when they get to college and are a young adult. For years, the number was hovering about 50%. 50% would be a kid who's involved in a youth group, goes to college and walks away. Then it grew to 60%, 65%. Some people say it's as much as 70% or higher. The problem is, I don't want anyone to walk away from their faith community and their faith when they grow up. I want them to grow up in their faith and know that that's their greatest resource in life. And sometimes a statistic like that can bother you. 50%, 5 out of 10 walk away, 6 out of 10 walk away. Statistics can be very bland and non-impactful until you start thinking about 10 people you know that are teenagers. When you put your two, like I put my 2 kids in that stat, and I go, are they going to be ones that walk away? Suddenly it gets much more personal. It bothers me that any kid would walk away from their faith because that is what matters most in life, is their faith. And we've done a lot of research and thinking about how do we change that stat. And you can go back and watch some previous messages from Next Gen Sundays where we talked about that. We have lots of resources to help you think through that. I've identified a lot of things that make a difference. But I just know one thing that will change that stat is your willingness to move from being a spectator to a participant. Don't just sit and watch the next generation. Don't just sit and watch, but get in the game and serve. Dive in. And I want to coach you now. I want to sit in the coaching seat for a minute and coach you how to get in the game and make an impact. There's a passage in Matthew chapter 9 where Jesus, we see something he does, and there's some great things that I think could launch you from being a participant to being on the player's bench to getting in the game and making a big impact. You could be an impact player in the next generation. And let me coach you how to do that. In Matthew 9, it says this. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. And then Jesus does something really impactful, that if you would do this, it would make a difference. When he saw the crowds. A lot of us are seeing the next generation, but we're seeing it through the lens of their Snapchat, or the lens of Facebook, or the lens of Instagram, or the lens of what's happening around us, but we're not sitting and observing with a missionary mindset. To say, I want to love the next generation like Jesus loves the next generation. I want to love the next generation like I'm loving my neighbors, I love myself. I want to sit and I want to see what the next generation is actually dealing with. And the more you see what this generation is dealing with, it will break your heart. It is a challenge. It is a struggle to be a teenager. There are unique challenges that are much different from when I was a teenager. And it's changing more and more all the time. And then you add COVID on it, and that's had a huge, significant mental health, spiritual health, physical health impact on our teenagers. I want to challenge you to look and be a student of that culture. And when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. I want to challenge you to look at the next generation and not shake your head. What's wrong with them? Or what are they thinking? I mean, that's what you had every right to think about that when I was a teenager. I gave you many things to shake your head about and go, what was he thinking? Chances are I wasn't. But I want to challenge you to look at the next generation with compassion, Jesus' compassion. To say, Jesus wants to love the next generation through me. I want to look and see so I can love better. Compassion to understand, for my heart to go out to them. And this is how he described that generation, because he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. That's the next generation. That's actually most of us in the world. We are harassed and helpless. There's all kinds of things coming at us all the time. And when sheep didn't have a shepherd, they usually didn't last. When sheep didn't have a shepherd, they usually got lost. When sheep didn't have a shepherd, it did not end well. They would wander. They would find danger. Danger would find them. And Jesus said, that's not how we were designed to live. We weren't designed to live like sheep who just wander aimlessly. But we were designed to be like sheep who follows the good shepherd. And Jesus had compassion on them. He saw and had compassion on them. And I want to challenge you to look and see. That's your action step this week. Just be a student of the next generation, but do it through the lens of compassion. And then this is what Jesus did next. Verse 37. Then he says to his disciples, he sees the crowd. We see the next generation. We have compassion on them. We care about them. He sees them, but he doesn't say something to them next. What he does is he looks at, he has compassion on them, he sees the challenge, and he looks to his followers, his disciples, and he says something to them about the people group that's harassed and helpless, much like the next generation. A people group to be loved, cared about, invested in because they matter. He looks, he sees with compassion, then he turns and talks to his disciples and he says this, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. He goes, you may never think anybody's a lost cause. Never write somebody off. Thank God that he does not write us off. Look at them with compassion and recognize there's great opportunity there. There's great need there. And he says, the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Ask God to send people into the harvest. One of the most powerful prayers you can pray for someone, God, would you please put somebody in their life that could make a difference? Pray a prayer of compassion and urgency. If God put someone in their life, send somebody. Send somebody out to make a difference. Spend some time praying for the next generation this week. But I want you to know something very significant about this passage. I love this passage. It's a great model to look at any people group and how you make an impact. You see, you have compassion, you pray, but the very next thing that happens is when you pray that people be sent out to be workers in the harvest field, the very next thing that happened for the disciples, that Jesus says, you guys pray that God sends somebody. You know what happened next? God sends them. The very next thing is Jesus sends them out to make a difference. This is a dangerous prayer. Because what you find out as you're praying for God, please send someone into the life. Quite often, God will say, oh, great, I can answer that prayer very easily. It's you. Do something. Step in there. The problem with loving your neighbor that's very different than you is you have to really be a student. You have to understand. You have to have a missionary mindset. And every generation is so unique that we have to have that missionary mindset. So I want to challenge you practically this week and ongoing to do something to love the next generation. Do something. Get in this chair and be willing to be coached and then get in the game. Your something will have a rippling effect. It'll make a difference. So practically, let me help you think about some somethings you could do. How do you do that? One is just commit to get in the game. Commit to say, God, I want to sit in the seat where I'm ready to be coached and put me in when you're ready, wherever you're ready. That's a hard thing for a player to do because most players either have an attitude of, I want to go in now and make a difference, or if you're not very comfortable in your sport, you're like, God, please don't pick me. If that's your prayer, God, please don't pick me. Man, just start with talking to God about that. What keeps you from wanting to invest in the next generation? But if you will commit and say, God, I'm willing to invest in the next generation, to love the next generation. Here's 5 things you can do, 5 practical things you could do. The first thing is think about time. Invest your time. Spend some time this week doing something to invest in the next generation. Something, anything. If you're going to love your next generation neighbors, even if they're many generations down the block, if you're going to love any generation, if you're going to love anybody, it's going to take time. Invest some time this week. So the question is, okay, so I'm investing some time, but what do I do? Here's some things you could do. You can invest some time learning. Have a missionary mindset. We have great resources. Fuller Youth Institute is one of our go-tos that we look to for their research on the next generation to help us know better how to understand what they're struggling with, but also how can we love and care for and invest in the next generation. We have lots of resources. Let us know if you want resources. But be a student of the next generation. Be interested in them. Be interested in the world of what's going on around them. Ask questions. Find someone who's the next generation and just ask them some questions about their life. And really, if you want to get involved with the next generation, invest some time, spend some time learning, but the next one will be listening. Ask the questions. It's a way to learn, but it's also a way to connect. Talk to somebody in the next generation. Even if it's a casual conversation, you're passing somebody, hey, how's your week? Or what's your next week look like? Anything you're stressed about? Anything going on in your world that you'd like to talk to someone about? I'd love to hear about what's going on in your world. What are you excited about these days? What are you involved in these days? Just ask questions. Say something to them. Start a conversation, but spend more time listening. A rule that we kind of use around here is talking to the next generation. Do 80% listening and 20% talking. Like the 80-20 rule, like listen more than you speak. But say something to them. And don't just say something to them personally, but say something about them to God. Because that's the next thing you could do. You could spend time, you can learn, you can listen, you could pray. Pray to the Lord of harvest that he sends someone into their life. Say something about them to God. Have a conversation. Put a prompt on your phone every day at a certain time. Maybe it's right when school's starting. To pray for the next generation. To pray for the teachers, coaches, administrators, principals, and all the people that are on the next generation. Pray for small group leaders at Live Oak that are serving in kids ministry and student ministry, college ministry. Pray for them. And then tangibly, the last one is actually serve. Find a way you can serve. What could you tangibly do to know, invest, and love in the next generation? What's a way you could serve? And there's lots of things you could do. I just want to challenge you to do something. Invest in the next generation. I want you to move from being a spectator to a participant. I want to get you in the game, not just because of the impact it'll have on the next generation. It will impact you. Talk to some of our small group leaders in kids ministry and student ministry. So many times when you serve, it impacts you. And it makes a difference in you. But the stakes are so high, we need to know and invest in the next generation. And the way we say it is everybody should do something to know. Be a student. Be a learner. Be curious about the next generation. But be curious with compassion. To invest in, serve, do something tangibly where you're doing something to invest in them. And love. Everyone should do something to know, invest in, and love the next generation. Love is not just an emotion. As a matter of fact, sometimes loving others goes against what we feel. Love is tangible action expressing God's care and you joining him in loving others. One of the things that could help you think about that is think of younger you. When you were a teenager, when you were a middle schooler, when you were a college student, when you were an elementary school student. What did younger you need? The times were different, but some of the needs are always the same. What would you have said to younger you? Say that to the next generation. What did younger you need? Be that for the next generation. And love your younger neighbors. Do unto younger others as you would wish was done unto you. Love your neighbor means loving your neighboring generation, and it matters. And we want to challenge you to do something. It might be informal, something you do on your own, or it might be tangible, something you do here at Live Oak. I want to turn you over to Tammy Roberts. She's our director of Next Gen Ministries and Live Oak Student Ministry. She leads Lawsome, our middle school and high school ministry, but she also leads our Next Gen team that leads us as a church to knowing, investing, and loving the next generation. I want her to tell you a minute some tangible ways you can get involved, and then we're going to come back, and I've got an exciting announcement for you. Don't go away. You don't want to miss this. Here's Tammy Roberts.
Hey Live Oak, my name is Tammy Roberts and I'm the director of Next Gen Ministry. Being in the Next Gen Ministry means that I get to serve with kids of all ages, babies, elementary age students, middle school, high school, and even college age students growing into the next phase of their life. Walking through all of these ages as they grow in their faith is the best job ever. And not only is it the best job because of the young people, it is the best job because of the adults that I get to serve with along with our Next Gen team. These adults say yes to the next generation. They say yes to serving in so many capacities, I can't even name them. They're on screen, off screen, behind the stage, weekly, monthly. But there are so many adults here at Live Oak saying yes to the next generation. If serving in the next generation is something that you're interested, now is a great time to just take a look. You don't have to sign on the dotted line, but we would love to share with you what it means to serve in the next generation and what it looks like. Over the next 4 weeks, we'll be doing sneak peeks into our Next Gen serving opportunities, and we'd love for you to come check it out. Again, you don't have to say yes now. We'd just like you to take a look. Also, if you're interested in taking a look at some of the things that are going on other times besides Sunday, you can do that as well. If you're interested, you can click on our app or our website on Sign Up and Events, and you'll take you to a really quick form to just let us know that you're interested. For those of you serving in the next generation, small group leaders, worship leaders, set design, I can't tell you thank you enough for what you're doing in the next generation. What you're doing matters. Whether it's Sunday morning, Wednesday night, Tuesday night, or taking kids to coffee on the weekends, you are making a difference. You are serving the next generation and you are making more and stronger followers. Parents, families, young people, thank you so much for letting us be a part of your life. Thank you for letting us pray for you. Thank you for letting us do life with you. Thank you for letting us help you in your faith journey. It truly is the biggest honor. Thank you so much.
Hey, I'm really excited about our next series. It starts next Sunday, February 21st. And I want to invite you to come back and join us and gather around the fire. We're going to have some fireside chats. Because the Bible uses the imagery of fire a lot in the Bible to communicate some very important truths that would help you grow a vibrant faith that thrives like a fire. And we want to ask you to gather around the fire and build a faith like a roaring fire. And there are also a couple of conversations that Jesus had and others had around a campfire, a little fireside chat in the Bible that were impactful on those that were there. I encourage you to join us for fireside chats next week. It's going to be a very fun series and hopefully an impactful one for you that helps you build a faith like a roaring fire. Let's pray together. God, thanks that you love us. Thanks that you sent somebody into our lives to express your love for us. Many of us had somebody that when we were younger, that invested in us. They prayed for us. They took time with us. They learned about us. They used words with us to communicate to us. They prayed for us. There were so many people that had impacts on some of our lives. God, thank you. Help us to go and be thankful to them and say thank you. To learn from them and do that for others as people had done for us. Some of us didn't grow up with somebody investing in us. We felt very alone when we were younger. Help us be the person that we needed when we were younger for others. It's a tough time to be a kid, to be a teenager, to be a college student, to be a young adult. Help us as a church love the next generation well, to do something, and to do something together that would impact the next generation, that makes a rippling impact. Give us wisdom to know what to do and also what not to do. Help us to be people who love our next generation neighbors well. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thanks. We'll see you next week for Fireside Chats.